Oh, bloody love Doctor Who. I was sat here, I was thinking, okay, so we've got the Unquiet Ghost next. That's one of those, you know, I love history, but I don't tend to love historical Doctor Who episodes, and I definitely don't remember loving this one. Whenever I think of this episode, it feels old and crusty. I I remember so little about it despite watching it 3 previous times that I forgot Charles Dickens was in it. Charles Dickens, of course, being quite a major part of the episode, and yet I watch it and I'm like, fuck, I love Doctor Who. This is a good episode. Hopefully, I can continue this enthusiasm for episodes that I feel less strongly about as we get to later seasons where there are more episodes that I feel less strongly about as we go. But for now, yes, I'm having a delightful time. In this episode, the Doctor and Rose travel back to 1869 and find themselves wrapped up in a little ghost story. And I think, if I remember, one of the reasons I didn't like this episode back in the day is because I was like, this isn't very sci-fi and alien and they're just trying to make ghosts a thing, but this isn't supposed to be about surrealism. Except that's the whole point of the episode, is that we don't know everything.
There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Even for you, Doctor.
Now, clearly this episode was written by a big Charles Dickens fan. I'll be honest, I don't know much about Dickens. I've had a gander at some of his books, and his writing is intimidating. I've never actually seriously tried to read any of his books. There's plenty of time left in my life, I hope. That's a fun thing to say. But yeah, you know, you get taught Christmas Carol in school. Although sometimes they do substitute Dickens for the Muppets. But I think this episode does a good job of introducing everyone to Charles Dickens. I think that's something Doctor Who does a pretty decent job of in general with its historical name drop episodes, if you want to call them that. Like, there's been plenty of episodes where I'm like, I know nothing about this person, but I have a pretty decent idea of who they are throughout the course of this episode. And I think they use Charles Dickens to a really good extent here. They use him as the cynic. They use him as the character who is, you know, towards the end of his life, he's feeling like, I think he says in the beginning something about he's written everything he has to write. He has no new original ideas, that kind of thing. So it's really fun that he's not just a name drop. He's not just there to be like, it's the Charles Dickens episode. It's like an exploration of him as a person and like, I assume, historically researchedly accurate, wow, that was good phrasing, historically accurate Charles Dickens and how he might react to a circumstance like this. Now, I talk a lot about the extraterrestrial versus the terrestrial. It's here again, except it's more like the fantastical versus the realistic. And it's fun to see how Rose is now pretty much in the Doctor's camp of understanding strange things. She has a moment when the risen dead start wandering towards her where she's like, you're kidding me, right? And it's kind of like The Basement in episode 1 version 2, where, you know, the mannequins are walking towards her and she thinks it's a prank. She kind of begins to fall back on that old instinct, and then she's like, very quickly snaps out of it, like, nope, this is not a joke. This is just another crazy thing in this reality that I did not think was possible and am now being met with. And if I do not believe that it is possible, I will probably die. So Charles Dickens is more of a damsel in distress this episode.
Stop it. Can it be that I have the world entirely wrong?
Not wrong. There's just more to learn.
I've always railed against the fantasist. Oh, I loved an illusion as much as the next man, revelled in them, and that's exactly what they were. Illusions. The real world is something else. I dedicated myself to that. Injustices, the great social causes. I hoped that I was a force for good. Now you tell me that the real world is a realm of spectres and jack-o'-lanterns. In which case, have I wasted my brief span here, Doctor? Has it all been for nothing?
I love how deeply introspective Charles Dickens is. That's a sentence. How obsessed he is with having spent his life in the correct manner and helping the world and doing good. And now that he is met with this new reality, having this crisis of Well, the Doctor calls it culture shock in episode 1, but you know what I mean, like this crisis of faith almost. Maybe not in like religion, but like in himself and in the way he's lived his life. It's something that's inevitable with later seasons of Doctor Who is that this whole extraterrestrial versus terrestrial, this whole fantastical versus realistic kind of juxtaposition, this exploration of the normal and the strange and how it affects these characters is very much passed back, because otherwise we'd just be doing it over and over and over and over again. And I understand that, but I do miss it in later seasons of Doctor Who. And while I don't know much about Charles Dickens, I think using him as a vehicle with which to explore these themes is a bloody brilliant idea. Or should I be saying fantastic? Sorry, we are still in the 9th Doctor's era.
I saw nothing but an illusion.
If you're going to deny it, don't waste my time. Just shut up.
The Doctor continues to be quite brutal here when he's faced with something that angers him. Like, you get the impression that the depths of his anger are quite deep, not for this particular situation, but just, you know, it's like the telltale sign of a man who has compartmentalized some of his emotions. I think, anyway, as an observer. I don't know. But then we get the apology later on.
Oh, come on, Charles. All right. I shouldn't have told you to shut up. I'm sorry. But you've got one of the best minds in the world. You saw those gas creatures.
I'm jumping around in terms of chronology a bit with these conversations if you are confused, but I just wanted to make a point. Call it YouTubers' folly, the desire to go through an episode in chronological sequence of events just for the sake of ordering things nicely, but being unable to talk about why each particular thing is great without also talking about how it pays off or how it ties into a later part of the episode, and vice versa. Anyway, yeah, the apology, obviously showing that the Doctor's not just a guy who yells at his idols to shut up when they show themselves to be limited by their imagination of the particular time that they're in. Speaking of imagination and time, I really love the friendship that blossoms between Rose and Gwyneth in this episode.
Gwyneth, you can tell me. I bet you got your eye on someone.
I suppose. There is one lad. The butcher's boy. He comes by every Tuesday. Such a lovely smile on him.
Like a nice smile. Good smile. Nice bum.
Well, I have never heard the like.
Ask him out.
It's so genuine, and it reminds us that Rose as the companion is very much the human element of the two travelling. You see this later on when the Doctor very much pushes for Gwyneth to help the Gelf out, before obviously any of them know that the Gelf are malicious in intention. And Rose is the one who is deeply concerned about Gwyneth's safety and what that will do to her. In fact, thinking about it now, I do think that Rose could have been a little bit more angry with the Doctor at the end of the episode, given that he kind of pushed her to do this and it didn't turn out well, as in Gwyneth ended up fucking dead, but then Gwyneth is the one who ultimately made the decision in the end, and I remember she told Rose, don't I have a say in this? Also, at this point in the story, it's never overtly said, but Rose now knows about the Doctor's past, and this is shown with the look that she gives the Doctor when the Gelf talk about the Time War. And, like, in that look, communicated in that look, it's almost like she's wondering, is the Doctor going to be okay? His past is, you know, coming up now, and some parts of it which have affected these people may be tied to him, and, like, how's he going to cope with this situation? She knows that he's got this past, and she cares about him. Despite being the first dynamic in New Who, the Doctor-Rose dynamic, as a Doctor-companion dynamic that is fairly unique in that it is legitimately romantic in nature, and it's really sweet to see it kind of blossom as the series goes on. People might argue whether the Rose 9 dynamic is the same as the Rose 10 dynamic, and if it was romantic in season 1 as it was in season 2, but I think it was.
Blimey.
Don't laugh.
You look beautiful. Considering
Considering what?
that you're human.
I think that's a compliment.
God, talk of scenes you forget about or never really took in originally. That is so cute. Like, the way the Doctor catches himself and realizes what he said and then has to try and, like, cover it up a bit by being like, for a human. Anyway, sorry, I was talking about Rose and Gwyneth, wasn't I?
I've seen London in drawings, but never like that. All those people rushing about, half naked for shame. And the noise. And the metal boxes racing past. And the birds in the sky, no, they're metal as well. Metal birds with people in them. People are flying. And you've flown so far, further than anyone. The things you've seen. The darkness. The big bad wolf.
Firstly, I fucking love her accent. The Welsh accent is just adorable. I'm sorry, it just is. If you're Welsh, you've got like +3 charisma points on me, just as a base stat. Anyway, the anachronistic nature of Gwyneth's future sight, seeing future London, I adore it so much. It's a quirk of Doctor Who, which I love it whenever it shows up, and it's just fun. It's just great. It's a shame they never took the chance to have her do a bit of a reading on the Doctor and see how she reacts to the Doctor's mind. But you know, can't have everything.
But what did you say, Doctor? Explain it again. What are they?
Aliens.
Like foreigners, you mean?
Pretty foreign, yeah. From up there.
Brecon?
Close.
Just anachronistic humour as well. I fucking love this show. Have I mentioned I'm a fan of Doctor Who? Now, for the first historical / time travelling into the past episode of Doctor Who, you think it would spend a long time setting up how time travel works in this universe. You think they would go to great lengths to explore, like, you know, what type of time travel we've got. Like, does it spin off into an alternate universe when time changes? Does it rewrite history, which it does? Like, does it, you know, is the butterfly effect a massive important thing? Is it super important not to change anything, not to tell people anything about the future, not to tell people about aliens? But this episode doesn't really even bring it up until near the end.
The thing is, Doctor, the Gelf don't succeed. Because I know they don't. I know for a fact that corpses weren't walking around in 1869.
Time's in flux, changing every second. Your cosy little world can be rewritten like that. Nothing is safe. Remember that. Nothing.
It's quite a convenient and easy explanation, and it does add stakes to every time travel into the past episode, which is pretty fun. Of course, we do get more into paradoxes later on in this season, but I thought it was interesting that this conversation was buried so far into the episode and was only mentioned briefly. It really goes to show that we're here in the past for an adventure. The adventure isn't the fact that we're here in the past. Also,
I haven't even been born yet. It's impossible for me to die.
I was 9 years old when this episode first aired, so I don't really know what the popular time travel theories and understandings were in fiction at that time, but this is a slightly dense statement. Like, Rose, you dying hundreds of years before you were born doesn't suddenly nullify the ability for you to be born later on in life. I don't get what she was thinking here. Like, I think this line is just included to show us that Rose is a little bit out of time here and isn't used to being in danger in the past and isn't used to wrapping her head around that, but it comes off a little dense. It's weird. Like, I get going, oh, the world doesn't end here. I live in the world, and that's hundreds of years in the future, and it's fine, and this didn't happen. I get that. That's good. You should bring that up. I don't get, I can't die here, I'm not born yet. What, are you your own parent? Anyway, time for the understatement of the century.
I think it's going a little bit wrong.
Interesting that the Doctor is able to maintain levity in this situation, considering that he does show anger later on, to be fair, but he tries to give the Gelf a chance. He tries to save a race of people who he may or may not have inadvertently doomed with his participation in the Time War. And it blows back on him, and, you know, the two people who they met besides Charles Dickens end up dead because of it, like, because of a decision he has made. I think it's interesting that he doesn't kind of wallow in regret of a decision he made. It's like he's got this confidence of, well, of course I had to make that decision and it just turned out that way, and it's bad that it turned out that way. I feel like that's very much like the confident decision making of someone who has been through war. I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm trying to relate everything back to the fact that he's just come through the Time War, but it is interesting to think about, having seen some of that stuff now and being able to relate to the Doctor as someone who's just come out of it. instead of just as a character we're meeting for the first time. Like, I talk about how the Doctor is quick to anger and he's got this brutality about him. I also think he's a little bit numb to death in his 9th incarnation, or at least at the start of it. I mean, he's not completely numb to it, obviously. You see he's very regretful when Gwyneth dies and everything, and I'm not saying he's like Peter Capaldi into the Dalek levels of careless. Oh, we'll get to that, by the way, about human death, but yeah, I feel like in another era, a different Doctor might have been a little bit more in his own head about the fact that he tried to save and ended up dooming. But of course, it was not his fault. It was a Gelf's fault. It was a Gelf's decision to do it this way, and he knows that, and good for him. Anyway, that was The Unquiet Dead, an episode which I really didn't think I would have much to say about going into it, and ended up making a full 15-minute episode about anyway, or longer. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you liked it. Maybe subscribe for weekly episodes, and I will see you next week for, oh god, the Slovene episode. How are we going to do that? It's a 2-parter. I'm going to try and make an episode about both parts, because I just think that's probably the way to go. Also, the less time we spend on the Slovene, the better. There's a little preview. So I guess join me next week for the Slovene.
She saved the world. A servant girl. No one will ever know.